What's the hardest thing about writing? Well, it's getting started. Maybe you're having a hard time coming up with a story idea, or you're stuck on where to take your story next. If you want a way into a story or a way through, I have 9 story starters to help you. This free PDF is full of story seeds and prompts to get you going. To download your 9 story starters, go to nancypanuccio.com/start. That's Nancy with an I, Panuccio with 2 C's, nancypanuccio.com/start. A retrospective story tells us who the character was and who he or she is now. It's the story of who this person became. Writer Unleashed is for you, a writer who has a story you want to bring onto the page and into the hearts and minds of readers. I'm Nancy Panuccio, writer, editor, and writing coach. And each week, we'll explore techniques, mindsets, and inspiration for writing stories readers can't put down. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now let's begin. Let's talk about retrospective narrators. They have the power to tell your story with both raw immediacy and hard-earned wisdom. Unlike a narrator who unfolds the story in real time, a retrospective voice sees the full arc, the triumphs, the heartbreaks, the moments of meaning that were invisible in the moment. All memoir is retrospective, and many novels are told in retrospect, meaning the protagonist is telling the story in hindsight, having already lived through the events. This narrator doesn't just recount events, he or she reinterprets them. But here's the challenge. Many writers struggle to fully embrace the reflective power of a retrospective voice. Instead, they end up narrating the past like it's an itinerary of events without considering the narrator's present story and how the past and present are in dialogue throughout the story. So in today's episode, we'll explore how to unlock the full potential of a retrospective narrator. You'll learn how to blend action with reflection and craft a voice that harnesses both the younger self and the wiser self. So let's get right to it. What do we mean by a retrospective narrator? A retrospective narrator is an adult looking back on the past. The story moves towards some revelation or accrued wisdom. And I love this quote by Virginia Woolf. The past is beautiful because one never realizes an emotion at the time. It expands later, and thus we don't have complete emotions about the present, only about the past. Said another way, a retrospective story recontextualizes the past through reflection on what it all meant. But it can only gain that wisdom in hindsight. The past is not just a collection of events. There's reflection. There's no reason to have a character look back on the past without reflection. There must be a relationship between the present story and the past story. A retrospective story tells us who the character was and who he or she is now. It's the story of who this person became. So you want to make sure your retrospective narrator is making deeper and deeper sense of what happened, or a deeper sense of their part in what happened. That means there are two voices in any retrospective story, the voice of innocence and the voice of experience. This is especially true in memoir, but it applies to any story told from an adult looking back on his or her younger self. And this is something I learned from the memoir writer Sue Silverman. Your retrospective narrator has different depths of view. You know how you have different points of view in a story? So you have multiple points of view? Well, the equivalent in a retrospective story is different depths of view. Different depths of view. Who I was and who I am now. The voice of innocence tells us what happened. The voice of experience tells us what it all means. So the question is, how do you bring both voices into the story? Well, there are two ways to approach writing a retrospective story using both voices. Number one, use dual timelines. This technique alternates between past and present timelines, allowing the narrator to reflect on key events while also showing their present-day self. This is common in memoir, where the author moves back and forth between childhood experiences and their adult reflections. It's also used in fiction to create a sense of haunting or lingering consequence. Margaret Atwood's Cat's Eye is a perfect example of a dual timeline. The real story is in the past. The present is a frame for the past. So she goes back and forth between both timelines, but the real story plays out in the past. That's the story that takes up most of the narrative space. She uses the present as a frame for that story. Jeanette Wall's memoir, The Glass Castle, begins with a scene in her adulthood where she's in New York City and sees her mother dumpster diving, inciting her to reflect on her family's history. From this point, the narration shifts back in time, using flashbacks to recount her childhood experiences with her parents and her siblings. So she interweaves the past and the present. She interweaves flashbacks with her present-day perspective, allowing us to see how her past experiences have shaped her into the person she is today. So you can alternate between both voices rather than write the story chronologically. Some writers use the experience voice to frame the past, others go back and forth. For example, in Cat's Eye, we go back and forth with more narrative space given to the child's voice. In the present, we're in the adult's voice, but, and this is important, she's reflecting on the past. So she's recontextualizing the past. In the present, she's still haunted by what happened in her childhood. Even in the present, even in the voice of experience, she's impacted by what happened. Okay, the second way to use both voices is to integrate them. Here's an example from Catherine Harrison's memoir, The Kiss. Now, throughout the memoir, she superimposes her adult perspective on her younger self. So we're getting some of the adult language, but she's not interpreting the events for us. It's all in the subtext. Here's the excerpt. My mother sleeps. For as long as she lives with us in her parents' house, she sleeps whenever she can. She sleeps very late every day, as much as 6 or 7 hours past the time when I get up for breakfast. I stand beside her bed as she sleeps. Wake up, wake up. I think the thought so loudly inside my head that it seems as if she will have to rise. She can't remain insensible to my imploring her, my wanting her as fervently as I do. I never understand that she has fled into sleep. that she seeks comfort in sleep, that sleep is where she hides. I know only that I can't bear to let her do it. Her eyes closed and hidden behind her satin sleep mask, her face as flat and white as the mask is flat and black. This terrifies me. Sleep makes my mother's face itself into a mask, one mask under another. She draws each breath so shallowly it seems as if she must be dying, that she might never wake. I go into her bathroom and run the water from the taps. I flush the toilet, pick up her hairbrush, and set it down hard on the counter. Drop a shoe, close a door. I make any noise I can that might rouse my mother, but that can't be judged as a direct and purposeful assault on the fortress of her sleeping. Because for as long as my mother refuses consciousness, she refuses consciousness of me. I do not exist. Okay, so we're using some of the adult language superimposed onto the child's voice. We're getting the past events narrated from the hindsight of her adult self. So her adult perspective is superimposed onto her younger experience. And there's a reason for this. This memoir is her attempt to understand what led her to have an incestuous affair with her long-lost father at the age of 20. In the present, she's married with a child of her own, and one of the things the memoir explores is the emotional deficit her own mother left in her life. So a retrospective narrator is looking back on each event with reason. So you want to look at each instance or scene in your retrospective story and ask, what is it doing there? What's at stake? Whether you alternate between the present and past, whether you write it chronologically or integrate the wiser voice with the innocent voice, the past is always being recontextualized by the wiser, experienced voice. Different depths of view, who I was and who I've become. Okay, let's recap. In a retrospective story, the narrator is looking back on the past through the lens of experience. When you write with a retrospective narrator, the story is being filtered through reflection and accrued wisdom. But it's more than just recounting events. It's about layering perspective. You have two voices, the narrator in the present with all their insight and their younger self reliving the moments as they happened. We talked about two ways to handle the two voices of your retrospective narrator. Number one, use dual timelines, alternating between the innocent voice and the wiser voice of experience. Number two, integrate both voices. With this technique, the wiser voice is superimposed onto the younger voice, so there's the adult reflection integrated with the younger self. In any retrospective story, the past is bearing weight on the present. So you need to know the relationship between your character's past and your character's present. Don't just give us a collection of events. This happened, then this happened, then this, and so on. So here are 5 questions to ask yourself about your retrospective narrator so you can make that connection between your character's past and your character's present. Question 1. Why is this person telling the story? Why now? Question 2. How does the past impact the lived experience in the present? Question 3. How much time has passed between the events and the telling? How much hindsight is there? Question 4. Why is your character reliving the past? What is he or she trying to understand, come to terms with, or reconcile? What's the central question your narrator is probing the answers to? And question 5, what does your narrator know now that he or she didn't know then? That deeper inquiry needs to permeate all the events in your retrospective story. So there you have it. Thanks for hanging out with me today. And if you know any writers who need some support in their writing, please share this episode or the Writer Unleashed podcast in general. And if you love what you're listening to, subscribe on your favorite listening platform and please leave me a review. Reading how this podcast impacts your writing truly lights me up and helps me create topics for the show. Till next time, keep writing, and I'll talk to you soon.